Adam Engst at the Diablo Valley Macintosh User Group. This is MacVoices. Today's MacVoices is supported by MacVoices After Dark. Uncensored, off-topic, and always off the wall. MacVoices After Dark is available as a benefit to our Patreon subscribers. Sign up at patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joiner. Adam Engst and I did a virtual visit with the Diablo Valley Macintosh User Group recently. This is the first part of that conversation, and much to my surprise, we start out by talking about Adam's shopping habits. Let's let Adam do the talking.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Divi Magzumi, and it's Tuesday, November 15th, right? And today we have special guests. We have Adam Engst from TidBITS and Chuck Joiner from MacVoices. They're going to join us, and we're going to have a discussion about whatever they think is the current topic. Go ahead. Take it away.
Well, Adam Snow is the current topic for me here, but I don't think they want to hear about that. So,
yeah, right. Winter kicked in hard in the last 3 days. You know, we had 75 degrees last Sunday on the 6th, and then this Sunday, dropped to 30 and snowed. So,
yep,
that's it. That's New York for you.
Right there with you. I feel like we should probably just touch on what some might perceive as the elephant in the room, and that is some changes at TidBITS. And what that means to you.
Because the inside baseball of staffing things at TidBITS is, I'm sure, what everyone has been dying to know.
No,
yes, no.
Yeah, but look, let's be fair about it. I mean, anything or anybody associated with TidBITS is pretty high profile in the Apple community, so I think it deserves a comment.
Well, and we have been cruising through managing editors. I mean, we've now been around for 32 years, and Josh Centers, as you may have seen, just stepped down as our third managing editor. So we're averaging 10 years of managing editor now. So, this revolving door has got to stop.
So are you assuming those duties temporarily? Is that your thinking, or?
Well, I mean, honestly, so to be completely clear, this was, an entirely mutual decision. Josh and I, sort of both simultaneously, it's like, we think we might want to do some things a little differently on a phone call. And it turned out that it worked out. But basically, he'd been doing it for, managing editor for almost 10 years. He'd been writing for TidBITS for 10 years. And, he's sort of done all the things that he wanted to do, and, felt like he was just kind of spinning his wheels a little bit with the constant, as our friend Jason Snell calls it, the news treadmill. There's just always more things happening that you feel the need to report on, but really, does it matter? And certainly when TidBITS started, I mean, keep in mind, we've been doing this since 1990. When TidBITS started, it was really important that we covered news items, because that was a lot of the way that people found out about the news. I mean, when the very earliest issues of TidBITS, the entire point of them was to summarize what was happening in Mac Week and InfoWorld and PC Week, things like that. People who did not receive the free news magazines, because the only way to receive them was to lie like a demon on their application forms and claim you were responsible for hundreds of Macs, and then they would send it to you for free. But lots of people didn't do that, so they didn't get the magazine. But, the times have changed, and, we've already gone from, the fact that we were faster than the paper magazines to being, as a weekly publication, slower than, the websites which don't really have a publication concept. They're just constantly posting articles at all times. And more recently, it's not that they haven't covered technology, but I would say more recently, publications like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, when Apple's the most valuable company in the world, the biggest publications pay attention to their news. So, we're not just competing against the likes of Macworld and MacUser from the old days, who were bigger, sort of more substantive publications than we were. We're competing against, the most respected newspapers in the world. And it's just not possible. I mean, quite put bluntly, there's very little we can write that they can't and haven't, probably better than we could have. In terms of sourcing materials, having resources. I don't know if you guys see these. Joanna Stern, who's the personal technology columnist for the Wall Street Journal, does wonderful videos. They're really well done. But she's got the resources of the Wall Street Journal behind her. Even if I wanted to do that kind of stuff, my videos would never be half as good as hers, because I can't bring to bear that level of production quality and resources and, people and money and all of that. So, and that's fine. I don't need to compete with everybody. So long story short, I think the reason why, so we're actually not, I'm not going to have a managing editor for a while, is that we're not going to be doing nearly as much news stuff. People are already finding that elsewhere. We're not adding any significant value because we don't know any more than anyone else does. And so we're going to, focus on the things where we can really make a difference, say things that are not being said elsewhere, and really do some cool things. I just posted an article, in fact, an hour or so ago. One reader wrote to us about some problems he'd been having with upgrading to Ventura. Because he didn't have enough free space on his drive. And that was interesting, because it shouldn't let you upgrade if you don't have enough free space on your drive, and how much is enough, and all these other questions. And so, this one email message, a couple of hours later, turned into, I think, a useful little article where I figured out what the number is, and how do you determine the number in terms of free space, because that's not nearly as easy a thing to look up as it used to be. The Finder does not always report the proper number, and things like that. So that's a situation where I think, I was able to really provide some information that was not widely available, and I think people will find it useful.
I might disagree with you a little bit on your opinion of your own content, because I feel like you all offer a good perspective on the news, as opposed to just reporting it. And I think there's a lot of value add there, but that's just the way I read it. And maybe I'm biased.
And I think situations where there's useful opinion, or where our experience can play in, we'll still write about it. It's more that, I don't know, Apple announces, well, I mean, I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do with these, but, like a new version of, iOS and iPadOS come out. It's a security update. All we know is what's written in the security notes. I feel like I'm not adding any value to tell you there's an update, which your iPhone or iPad will tell you, and they will tell you. The devices will tell you exactly the same thing that I know. So it's not. I don't feel like there's much I can say there that's really going to go above and beyond. Now, on the other hand, if there's an update and we hear that people are having troubles because they installed it and it's got some funkiness going on, that's something that's useful to tell people, because they couldn't find that out any other way. So I think that's going to be kind of a little the guiding factor is, is there more here than, is just obvious by going with what you've been told by your device or your app or whatever.
Yeah. The phrase "useful opinion" is a really interesting one in the world today, and that's a whole nother discussion that we better not do right now. we'll end up being sued for slander.
Useful? That's not useful.
Yeah, really. I never thought, though, that you and I would ever be doing a show in front of a user group or anywhere else and talking about your shopping habits. But here we are.
When I shop once every 3 years, I think it's news. So,
yeah, that's
Adam has gone shopping.
Yeah. And I don't have exactly the same hassles getting to an Apple store that you do. My closest one is about 50 minutes away, and I mean it's an easy drive, but it's just not the kind of thing you do just to go. If I need to go, I'll go. And so you have. It's been 3 years since you set foot in an Apple store.
Oh, it might have been more than that. I honestly don't remember. It hasn't happened since the pandemic.
Wow.
And so, I can't remember in 2019, what I might have done, but it's possible that I went to an Apple store sometime then.
Okay. So what happened when you finally
part
made
of it is, and actually, I think there's one thing to point out here, though, which is that, and I've gotten away with it, right? Like the internet is a useful thing. I don't feel as though it wasn't like I didn't know about any of this stuff. I mean, these were all products that have come out and that I've written about. The specs are online. You can read all about what they're about from the manufacturers. There's often good pictures. You know what it looks like. But, and this is the but, and that's where you're going, is like, is it always enough? I mean, the internet is great. Online information is great. No questions about it. But it's not always enough. And that's kind of what I discovered.
From what standpoint was the internet not enough?
A number of things, a number of products. It's, the term that I kind of I settled on was physicality. That you want to know what it feels like. So, I'm sitting here holding this is an iPad, 10.5-inch iPad Pro with a smart keyboard. Does this little flippy thing. Poof, there's my keyboard. And, poof, it's a case. That's the physicality of this device. And the keyboard was always on this device. It still is, because it's actually easier to hold with the keyboard on it. It's not as slippery, even though the keyboard doesn't work anymore. But what I was interested in is if I go to the Apple Store and try on an Apple Watch Ultra, how big does that feel on my wrist compared to my Series 5? Does it look funny? And what about Tanya's wrist? Her wrist's a lot smaller than mine. And then with the iPad keyboards, this smart keyboard that I like on this one, well, that's only still compatible with the 9th generation iPad that's still for sale, but now a year old. The 10th one has its own Magic Keyboard Folio. Then there's the Magic Keyboard and a Smart Keyboard Folio for the iPad Air and the iPad Pro models. So this is kind of interesting, well, if I was going to get a new iPad, which one would I want to get? And a lot of that is the feel of it. And that's something you can't figure out online.
Okay. I've had the same experience with the watch. And I've also, I guess this is a bit older, but I also had that experience with the M1 iMac when it came out. Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly what I expected, but it just was a lot more. It was a lot sleeker, I guess, than I expected. I mean,
M1, we can even start that if you want. But I mean, the M1 iMac, man, it came out April of 2021, and looking at the specs, now by that time I had an M1 MacBook Air, and it was the exact same chip. So I'm like, okay, this thing is going to perform brilliantly. The M1 is an amazing chip. My M1 MacBook Air here, which I have a nice little case on it, vinyl cover on it. This is a great machine. Absolutely adore it. And so, okay, if the iMac is going to be that kind of performance, that's great. But 24 inches, that's a weird number. Why is it 24 inches? And you can't see this, and I can't show you. I'm working on a 27-inch iMac, and I've used a 27-inch iMac every day since 2014 when it shipped. I also have over here a 27-inch Thunderbolt display, so I have two 27-inch monitors up, and one of them is that Retina. So the Retina display on the 27-inch iMac is absolutely gorgeous, and it has been gorgeous since 2014. I'll note, since it's not a new thing. So during all that time, Apple had the 21.5-inch iMac, and frankly, it was always kind of lame. I mean, 21.5-inch iMac was, it was really pretty small, and for quite a while, it didn't even have a Retina screen. I can't remember. At some point, they added a Retina screen, and so it was at least a high quality screen. But so when the 24-inch comes out, my reaction was, oh, that's the new small one. And the small one has never been that good. Particularly, I don't know if you guys remember this, for the longest time, Apple kept the 21.5-inch iMac in the lineup with a hard drive. It was like we actually, I wrote an article saying, do not buy this machine. Whatever you do not buy this machine. You will hate it. That putting a hard drive in a machine, and this is well after SSDs were across the rest of the line. And Apple is doing it to make it as cheap as possible. Like, do not buy this machine. This is a horrible machine. So so that was kind of my opinion about the smaller iMac. Well, like it might be okay, but it's not as good as the 27. So I go and look at one. And you know what? It was pretty impressive. It's a 24-inch screen. So yes, it's physically a bit smaller, but it's what Apple calls it a 4.5K Retina display. And so turns out it's 320 pixels smaller in one direction and 180 in the other. So that's really not a lot. And that's at its default resolution. And you can use in the displays panel, display system preference pane, you can just bump that up so that it's exactly the same number of pixels as the 27-inch iMac. And you know what? It was totally readable at that resolution too. So I went from, thinking, the 24-inch iMac, that's probably a good home machine, to thinking, oh, I could actually see working on one of these, as a professional. And I, at this point, the only thing that I would say about the 24-inch iMac is, boy, it'd be nice if they would put some faster chips in it, given the fact they've got them, the M1 Pro, the M1 Ultra, or the M2. So I think that'll probably happen. I mean, come April this year, what are the odds we're going to have an M2 iMac? Seems pretty high. So, again, an impressive machine. It looked really sleek, was super fast, and it was not what I was expecting based on sort of previous experience. So that was what the utility of going there in person was.
That's a good point, because I think I had a similar experience that the 21 and a half had been, or 21 or whatever it was, had always been like, yeah, that's for amateurs, and I really am not.
Nice back.
yeah, exactly. Really not quite into it. And but when I looked at the M1 iMac, to your point, I'm not a candidate for it because I want more power in it. But for most of the people I know, I could easily say, hey, this is a great machine. Go for it. And gorgeous screen.
Absolutely.
And more power than most of you will use, unless you're, doing something advanced with photos or video. So,
cheap. The iMacs have always been a deal and a half for the screen you get. That's the thing. So I, in fact, went from the 24-inch iMac, walked around the table to look at the 27-inch studio display, because that was the big deal, right? Okay, they've dropped the 27-inch iMac completely, and sort of the replacement is, Mac Mini or Mac Studio connected to a studio display. Okay, so how good is the studio display? Well, here I was a little disappointed. And it wasn't that it wasn't good. It was. It was exactly as good as my 27-inch iMac. But for $1,600 to $2,000, I want better than my iMac. For just the monitor, that it is at a price level, studio display is kind of expensive, and so that's a little disappointing. And I say I didn't really have any problem with the actual thing, the actual monitor. It was 27 inches. It looked big. It was beautiful. Far as I could tell, the camera was pretty good. People had trouble with the cameras for a while, and I don't know if that's gone away. People have stopped talking about it, but Apple's had a couple of firmware updates, and so I don't have anything against it, except that $1,600 or $2,000 price, and the difference is it's $2,000 if you want the height adjustable stand. I'm like, really, Apple, $400 to be able to move it up and down 2 inches? So that's. Again, seeing it in person didn't really quite change my opinion there, but it did confirm that, there's nothing wrong with this, except, how much do you want to spend on a monitor?
I'm not sure what all hardware you actually have there at hand, but
27-inch iMacs coming out my ears. See,
okay.
Literally. There we go. There's one. And there's another one on the opposite side of my desk. So I really like the 27-inch iMac. I'm telling you.
Okay, well then, let's see what else. Mac Studio. Did you get to look at the Mac Studio and any particular impressions there?
I did. and I mean, I guess the close. I didn't even include this in the article, the Mac Mini or the Mac Studio. The only thing that struck me was they were a little bigger than I kind of expected in height, in width, and then the Mac Studio was just sort of double the size of the Mac Mini. So it kind of fell into the category of whatever. It didn't really it's not something where I ever felt like it was going to be, they were going to take up a certain amount of space, and I did, when I saw them in person, I'm like, yeah, that's about that amount of space. I mean, I think it's different from the previous Mac Minis. I mean, it's a little bit, I think it's larger and wider, or like wider and shorter. Can't remember. I have to look at the specs. That I could do online. Part of the thing about going and looking in person was the Mac Studio in person is just a box. You don't interact with the Mac Studio as a box. You plug things in and it sits in the background. So I wasn't too interested in that. I mean, I had a feeling it was going to perform well, but you're an Apple store. You can't tell how it performs. I could barely type on the things because you're standing up at this weird height, and everything's not normal. So you couldn't really tell. Now the products where it made a real difference to be able to see and feel them were things like the Apple Watch and the iPads and iPad keyboards. And I was also I was interested in. I have a wallet case. You can see here. It holds my cards and things like that. And I've been paying attention to that space because I really like not having to carry a separate wallet. And so I was curious about Apple's MagSafe wallet, and which is pops on the back via magnets. And so being able to touch that was also interesting. I decided that it probably held on well enough because it's kind of attaches right here on the phone. The problem was it came off and moved easily enough that I was pretty sure that I would have it in my pocket and just be sitting there kind of fiddling with it all the time and moving it back and forth. I was like, probably that's not a good look. So but it was useful, right? I mean, Apple's MagSafe wallet is $59, and the leather case that it sort of is compatible with is another $59. So no, I'm not going to spend $118 to see if this thing works for me. Especially when this case I got from Smartish is only $40. So
the last one in the lineup I can think of is the HomePod Mini. And I know you definitely cannot listen to a HomePod Mini in an Apple store because there's just no point. But and I don't know if you had one before. Any thoughts on what that felt like?
So we just looked at those. So Tanya, we do have a HomePod Mini and two HomePods, and I have not. I mean, I'm not enough of a. Tanya uses the HomePod Mini, so she pays attention to that more. But my sense of it was that it was not as good as the HomePod, but not problematically in any way. You could tell the difference, but if you just heard the HomePod Mini, you didn't think, oh, that's a problem. Where it's not like, some cheap tinny Bluetooth speaker where you're like, that doesn't sound very good. No, the Apple Watch Ultra was kind of the main reason why we went, because it's freaking huge, right? I mean, it is a beefy thing. And Apple has done really well with the Apple Watch so far in making it accessible to people of a wide range of sizes. So, even the very first ones, Apple gave you 3 band pieces so that, you'd have one on one side, and then you could choose the short band or the long band for the other side, depending how thick your wrist was. And, that actually made a difference for a lot of people because, if you had a really big wrist, you needed the long band. If you had a really small wrist, the big band was going to be ridiculous. And so, I was really kind of intrigued by the Apple Watch Ultra, which is, it's a 49 millimeter screen, compared to, I think, what are the Series 8s, 45, 44? I never quite remember the last one. It changes a little bit every now and then. And I have, there's 40 and 40, I think it's 40 and 44. And I have the 40 here, and it's the right size for my wrist, I think. So I was thinking 49 is going to be really large, and is that a problem? And this was, again, very much like I would really recommend anyone thinking about an Apple Watch Ultra, go try it on. Unless you have, unless you're just a big person with really thick wrists, where it's like, oh yeah, no problem. But I tried it on, and I think it would work. The answer was yes, this is okay, but it was not obvious that it was okay ahead of time. And then when Tanya tried it on, the answer was, well, that looks stupid. You could see, it kind of hung out over her wrist, and you could put your finger in here, in the space you could see through it because it was so much larger than her wrist. And, again, that's the kind of thing that you want to make sure before you buy, or Apple's pretty good about returning stuff. For those people, you probably living in California have Apple stores, all over the place. But one thing that Apple is very good about is that there's a 14-day, no questions asked return policy. And so if you ever buy something and for whatever reason, such as it looks stupid on your wrist, you don't like it, you can send it back and full refund, no questions. So I do encourage people to take advantage of that if you need to. But yeah, so the Apple Watch Ultra, fit me, really didn't fit Tanya, and sort of good to know that as an option. And then the iPads and their keyboards were the big other thing.
I think that, other than the laptops, of course, and the laptops are the laptops.
Yeah. So let's talk about the iPads first,
Okay.
and the laptops, because, this is frustrating. So, I have the iPad here, and I basically never use it. I use it to watch Netflix when I'm sick in bed. That's what it's good for. And the problem is, and maybe I'm unusual in this, but I have a Mac with more pixels than I can shake a stick at. I have an iPhone in my pocket at all times. We have 2 HomePods and the HomePod Mini, so there's sort of one of those always around. And we have an Apple TV, so with a large screen TV. So like the iPad just doesn't fit into any of that. Like it doesn't do anything that I need that one of my other devices doesn't do better. And that's just me. I'm sure other people have other scenarios. For instance, I actually really like reading books on the iPhone because the line length on the small iPhone screen is actually just about the best for human eyes. There's a reason why newspapers have thin columns, because the human eye actually can only scan so far and maintain understanding. So the research actually really supports short line lengths. So in any event, so the question is, okay, there's these 5 iPads out, right? Actually 6 iPads, I guess, if you count the iPad Pro's 2 sizes. So you've got the 9th and 10th generation iPads. You've got the iPad Mini, the iPad Air, and then the 2 iPad Pros. I was intrigued by, the 9th generation one is like the same as my iPad Air or my iPad Pro 10.5 inch. It's that exact same feeling, but smooth back, the curved sides, all that kind of stuff. It even works with a smart keyboard. But the 10th generation iPads using the new style that Apple's been using for a couple of years now, which is more squared off. I call it the iPhone 5, iPhone 4, iPhone 5 design, because that's where we used to see it before Apple went curvy on the iPhones again. And the iPad Mini actually uses that same squared off design. The iPad Mini, I've always thought was kind of a weird, neither fish nor fowl size. But when I saw it in person, I've seen iPad Minis in the past, but like the current one, I was really taken with it. It's a cute little machine. It's not something that really I need, but I was like, wow, that is a nice size, and it felt great in the hand. It was something that you could imagine sitting and holding for a long time when you were reading a book or watching a movie or something like that. So very struck by that. And then the 9th and 10th, good sizes. They felt fine. No real issues there. We'll get into the keyboards in a minute. iPad Air also basically same as the 10th generation. 11-inch iPad Pro, same as the 10th generation. They're all roughly the same size and weight. Then the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, I've never actually laid hands on one of those. Just never had an opportunity. And it was really big. I mean, those things are ungainly. And so I can see why people might use them with a Magic Keyboard as more of like a pseudo laptop, because they're just a lot to hold. That's one of those things where, if you got to angle it around, you actually got to use your wrist a bit. So that was a surprising thing as well. Just getting that feeling of, oh wow, this is too big. And again, I'm the size I am, and larger people probably would go, oh, I don't know. Shaquille O'Neal's like the 12.9. I can barely find it. So my hands are so large. But it was an unusual realization. Again, something that I had not previously anticipated.
This edition of MacVoices is supported by our Patreon subscribers and MacVoices After Dark. Ever wonder what happens before the MacVoices live shows? Or what happens when the show ends or after the live feed closes? That's where MacVoices After Dark comes in. If you are a Patreon supporter at any level, you get access to the video of our off-camera conversations. Uncensored, unedited, and always off the wall. It's a small thank you to our Patreon supporters who want to peek behind the curtain. Become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/MacVoices. And thanks to everyone who supports the show. So you were going to touch on the iPad keyboards?
Yeah. So here's the next thing. So if I'm going to use an iPad, I have to be able to type on it, because that's what I do. I'm a writer. And so, I have an Apple Pencil, first generation Apple Pencil here for my iPad, and I use it about 3 times a year. So I don't really like it every time I use it, all 3 times a year. But I just I don't draw stuff. I don't have any other. I hate handwriting. I've always hated handwriting. I typed my papers in high school on an Apple II clone, because that way I would not have to handwrite them. So this is always a good thing. But the keyboards are they're weird. And this is coming from, the Smart Keyboard was kind of the first one that Apple did. And as I showed, it has this really nice kind of origami flippy thing where you can turn it into a keyboard. You can turn it back into a case really easily. And it doesn't add much weight, partly because it doesn't cover the back. So almost all of the other keyboards really have a different modality to them. So the Magic Keyboard, this is sort of the big one for the iPad Pros and the iPad Air. You can fold the iPad into it and carry it around, but it's so thick and bulky at that point, you wouldn't leave your iPad in it and then take it to bed to watch Netflix or sit on the couch and read a book, because the keyboard's just too big and it doesn't really fold out of the way like this one does, so that you can have your iPad. It's also battery's dead, it's getting old. So you can use this so much more fluidly that it's always available. And so the Magic Keyboard, to me, really felt like something you would set on a desk, and you would pull your iPad off it, and then go and use it like an iPad, and then you come back and put it in the keyboard and use it like a laptop. So that's certainly a way of working with them, but it's definitely not what I need. I have 2 27-inch monitors if I want to work at a desk. So that one, again, fell a little flat for me. And it's also not cheap. It's $300 or $350, which seems expensive to me. The Smart Keyboard Folio is a little bit the same situation. It only has a keyboard, no trackpad. And it kind of folds around the iPads. Kind of the same problem. It works fine. Don't get me wrong. The keys feel fine. None of that was an issue. It just I couldn't figure out would you always keep your iPad ensconced in this thing, or would you be taking it out because it makes your iPad twice as thick and significantly heavier? And the same thing really with the Magic Keyboard Folio, although there Apple did something even stranger in some ways, is they separated the keyboard and the back case. So you can actually take one off and the other off. And I mean, that's one where it might work out better to, be like, oh yeah, I'm going to leave the keyboard on my desk or whatever, and I'll leave the stand, it's kind of the kickstand on the back, and I'll use that, carry it around. But that only protects the back. And I don't know about you, but I don't need to protect the back so much as I want to protect the front. The front's where I'm worried about it. So again, just a slightly odd thing. And, it didn't grab me. It wasn't one of those situations where I thought, oh yeah, that makes sense. So again, none of these, I'm not saying they don't work well. I'm just saying that you had to think about it and how you would use it, because the way I use an iPad fairly flexibly, and just sort of mostly just the iPad itself, wasn't going to work well with these keyboards. They were going to be two separate things that you would bring together when you needed to type, rather than just flipping, boom, 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 and flipping it out. Oops, there we go. And being able to do this. So, that was weird. And you can still get the smart keyboard, but only for the 9th generation iPad. So that's the problem. Now, of course, you don't have to buy one from Apple either. There's the Logitech Combo, which is probably what you're going to pull out right there.
Chuck, we're not here. Chuck, we're not hearing.
Oh, good. It's not just me.
I'm sorry. That was my fault. I had it on the cough switch. No, Adam, I'm not sure if this was magic or which one they called this, but this is the iPad is in here magnetically, so I can peel it right out if I want. And this folds, like that. And I mean, does it add a little bulk? Yeah, a little bit. It adds a little weight. Yeah, it adds a little bit. But I don't find myself, if I want to take my iPad and watch it in bed, I won't intentionally peel the iPad out. It's not that much bulkier, that much weightier for me. But your mileage may vary.
Yeah. Well, that was, again. So it's an interesting question. Like, how much do first impressions matter? Right? Because I obviously, was in a store. I could touch these. I wasn't going to. We didn't have all day, so it was like you picked it up and you're like, oh wow, that's bulky. Like that was the impression. It wasn't, and I can remember some of these were good impressions too. Like when I glanced at the M1 iMac, I'm like, wow, that's great. And so with all of these things, I'm not saying they don't work or anything like that. I'm saying that you need to figure out whether or not it works the way you want it to work, because it didn't feel like it was going to for me. And that's, again, you can just imagine. And part of it is, like, you do see, even on this call, we clearly got people who are radically different sizes. And some of that matters, if you were a very small person, and Tanya complains about this, so, because she's, 5'2" or 5'3", somewhere around there. She's like, a lot of these things are just too big for her. She was really fond of the 11-inch MacBook Air because that was the right size, laptop for her. And, she can do okay with a 13, but, actually, and to segue, when we looked at the 14-inch and the 16-inch MacBook Pro, the 14 kind of seems like a good size again. It's a little bigger than the MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro, but not ridiculously so, and felt really nice in the hands and was nice and light and everything. The 16-inch, again, huge. I mean, talk about big. This thing was just crazy large. And, it's to the point where, like, I couldn't quite imagine, particularly in an airplane, sitting it on my lap, because, like, there's not going to be room. And then again, this is nothing new. We've had 17-inch MacBook Pros, right? But I've always been a 13-inch or smaller kind of guy, and this was just another example of, there's a reason why I think that. That for someone my size, that's really not the machine for me. And again, if you're like, I was talking to a friend of mine who has one, he's like, yeah, I don't ever use it on my lap. I use it on my coffee table, and I take it to work. So, it's a portable for me. It's not a laptop exactly. So, your mileage is going to vary, but that's why I'm suggesting you should make sure you check these things in person first if you can, before assuming that it'll work because, bigger is better.
And you were back and forth on the kind of the key point: iPad, MacBook or Mac laptop, desktop. It depends on what you're doing and what you want to do with your machine.
Yeah,
and that there are no right answers here, and yet everybody seems to continue to try to force everybody else into their vision of the world, which just drives me crazy.
How come you haven't switched to an iPad yet? The iPad is the next coming. I'm like, well, maybe it is for you.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, I've got iPads, and they're very useful to me, but I do different things than you do, or that some of the folks here do. And I carry the 16-inch Mac laptop because I like that no matter wherever I am, I have that super large screen, and the extra weight doesn't mean anything to me. So that's me. But I know a lot of people, just like you. Oh my God, this thing is a cafeteria tray. I don't want to. I don't want to carry this thing.
A lot of people don't spend as much time lifting weights as you do, Chuck. I mean,
well,
we know you're a major workout fiend.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to take my shirt off, but if you insist. Hey, we have some questions from the chat. Thanks for throwing those in, folks. And if you have questions or comments, throw them in. We'll try to get to it. Adam Evie asked, "What about the rumor that Apple's coming to Target stores?" I thought they were kind of already there.
Yeah, I haven't paid attention. We actually have a Target in Ithaca, so maybe I could go there and try stuff as opposed to having to drive for an hour or two. So yeah, I mean, for people like us, and for the purposes of like sort of why I was the story, I'm like, the Apple people came up to try to help me, and I'm like, thank you, but no, I don't need any help. And I think that that's one of those situations where to just touch stuff, if Apple does end up working with Target, the way they have with Best Buy, and obviously there's Apple authorized resellers who are independent, those are just fine too. If you just need to like feel a product and see what your impressions of it are, then that's fine. I will say my experience. Keep in mind, I've been doing this for a long time. So I remember when CompUSA was the reseller, and Apple was going to have a store within a store, and all this kind of stuff. And historically, whenever you're buying an Apple product from someone other than Apple, or a true Apple authorized reseller, a company that specializes in that, the level of help that you get from the people who work in that store is often pretty minimal. They don't know stuff. They often don't really want to sell you Apple stuff because historically they haven't earned as much. Spiffs were smaller, the percentages they earned. So I don't know anything about the Target rumors. But in general, I think that it's better, the more places you can buy stuff. Again, for this very reason, that I would have liked to be able to go try this stuff in person more easily.
Yeah, they've expanded, at least in the Best Buy here near me, they've expanded the Apple area. And on the busy days, they seem to have it staffed by someone that works for Apple. I'm sure they're an independent contractor, but someone that does seem to know more. And it always drives me crazy to go in and hear a Best Buy employee giving someone inaccurate information about either the Macs or the iPads or something. It's like, that's really not quite accurate. Let me show you how it really works.
Excuse me, sir, but I need to set you straight.
Yeah, well, I guess we all have that possessiveness about Apple, but it's just like, so if you guys are wrong about this, how much do you know about the refrigerator I'm coming in to buy? That's always the comparison I draw. So you really have to do your own research on it.
I mean, and there are fewer and fewer of them around, but I actually, if there is one near you folks, I strongly encourage you to support independent Apple resellers that but at this point, they've been in business for a long time. As I once noted, they're there to serve the adults. that not all the employees are 21, and people are not there trying to back. It's a little bit less true, obviously, the last couple of years, but for a while, Apple stores were like the place to hang out and look cool, pick up people, that kind of stuff. So the Apple resellers are they're usually a little bit less busy, they're less crazy, they're more willing to sit and talk to you and find out what your issues are and what you're trying to do to solve your problem. And that's not to say that I haven't gotten good service at Apple stores, because I usually have. But there is a certain level of having this 22-year-old tell me about stuff. I'm like, yeah, nice. Go away. It's okay. I know.
Adam goes in and says, "Don't you know who I am?"
No, I don't. That would just be obnoxious.
Yeah, I know. I know.
But yeah, it's like I probably do know more about this than you do, and let's not. We don't need to get into that.
Yeah. Let's see. So I hope I'm saying this right, Kenji. I hope I got that right. Why isn't the studio display 32 inches or even larger?
Well, they got to make that. If you're going to pay $6,000 for a Pro Display XDR, there's got to be some reason to do it. That's all I can assume. It's an unusual size, even still. So when Apple came out with a 27-inch iMac, it was clearly the industry tried it. There were 8 or 10 independent 27-inch monitors that were all that 5K Retina display size. And one by one, they all disappeared. So there is only one left, as far as I know, the LG Ultrafine 5K. And what that says to me is that panel is unusual. And so, the actual base hardware behind the screen. And, Apple and LG use it and no one else. And so with the studio display, I'm guessing that Apple is just like, okay, this is the panel size we've got. It's going to be 27 inches. And, what they're doing with the Pro Display XDR, and I actually can't remember how big that is exactly. It may be 32. It's somewhere in that range. The Pro Display XDR, is again, it's going to be an unusual panel because it's not the normal size. Pretty much what we've seen in the industry, and I do look at this periodically because of what am I going to replace my iMac with someday? 4K has become like the maximum you see. So 4K meaning roughly 4,000 pixels wide. And I do mean roughly because it's usually 3860. It's not 4,000. So it's even lamer than 4K. Whereas the 5K display is more than 5,000 pixels wide. It's 5240 or something like that. So it's a situation where the industry really kind of the commoditized those size panels and that resolution, and they decided that's good enough, and that's in my mind a little too bad. Just because I don't know. Yeah, I've looked at a 27-inch iMac for the last 8 years, and it's great. And 4K displays that I've seen have been not as good. And certainly, Kenji notes that he has a 1080p device, and I've got the 27-inch Thunderbolt next to this, and it's it's more than 1080p, but it's really, really noticeably not as good as the Retina display. So I don't know. I think that what Apple has basically just settled is everything will be Retina, and that's good, but as soon as you want to move outside the Apple world, such as by buying another monitor, then you're in trouble because you're not going to find the same level of quality.